Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. To this point, when we've been going after people, we've generally been going after those on the left, who I believe are disingenuously contending with right-leaning positions. That being said, this channel is not about solely focusing on the faults of one side. I truly want to build a full-spectrum political coalition here. And so at some point, I inevitably have to go after those on the right as well. On the point, there was recently a protest in Nevada where a group of climate change activists attempted to impede the flow of traffic. In response to this protest, the police force of Nevada rammed a truck right through the barricade, and a video of this incident was released online. Subsequently, conservative commentator Matt Walsh has provided a reaction to this video that he describes as heartwarming. Let's take a look at his thoughts, and I will provide my reaction.
So I have to mention this. You've probably seen it by now, but look, I'm a sucker for heartwarming videos. I just am. That may surprise you to learn about me, but I love the heartwarming. Like anytime I see one of those videos that comes up on the feed of like a young child getting a hearing aid for the first time and hearing his mother's voice for the first time, very heartwarming. I always stop and watch those videos to warm my cold, dead heart. And but of all the heartwarming videos I've seen online in recent weeks, I think none were quite so nice as this one. Let's watch it together.
Did anyone get that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. Like I said, I'm a sucker for these kinds of videos. So that was the tribal police in Nevada dealing with climate protesters who were blocking the highway. And as you can see, they just ram right through the barricade. They throw the protesters on the ground, cuff them, drag them off.
Now, before we let Matt elaborate on his position, I understand that I have a large conservative audience here who is most likely not going to be in agreement with the climate change protesters. They'll also find it slightly problematic, to use that completely overused word, that these protesters are blocking the flow of incoming traffic. These are people who are trying to get from point A to point B, and they are rudely standing in the way. Now, we are going to get into the legality of this all a little bit later. But on that note, let's let Matt continue his elaboration.
While they cry and whine, "We're nonviolent!" It's just fantastic to see. And there are a bunch of other videos like this from different angles. You can see the whole interaction. It's fantastic. I love every second of it. It's worth watching all of it. And the great thing is that the protesters themselves are the ones who filmed this and posted it, thinking that we would sympathize with them.
Mm-hmm.
That we would watch this and go, look at what those mean police did. That's terrible. Except that literally everyone who saw these videos said, wow, that's awesome. Good for those cops. That's great. Well done. And this is how cops should deal with these clowns everywhere. No patience, no mercy. Throw them in cuffs and drag them away.
No patience, no mercy, throw them in cuffs, drag them away. Well, I would say that's an interesting set of responses when the conditions for the protest have not yet been outlined. What do I mean by that? Well, in the case of this protest, people are obstructing individuals from getting where they need to go. Is that some kind of legal offense? Yes. The ACLU even outlines this in their little manual of protesting, that if you are going to impede traffic within a given region, then you need a permit. And I'm guessing these environmental protesters did not obtain a permit from the state of Nevada. I'm going out on a limb there, based on how they were received by the police. Do the police, thus, have the right to ask the protesters to leave? And if the protesters refuse, do they have the right to arrest them Yes. Given they are inhibiting other people through their protest, it is absolutely within the domain of responsibility of police. But let's continue.
Ram through the barricades and just deal with them like that. It's all great. And it's great because, for one thing, okay, blocking the road is not nonviolent.
Blocking the road is not non-violent. Well, that's a very interesting claim, Matt. Continue.
You are using physical force. You're using your own bodies to impede the movements of...
Is using your body to impede the movement of other people a use of physical force? Is this something that can be equated to violence? That's very interesting. It sounds like protests in general, which are supposed to be utilities of obstruction and defiance, would then, by definition, fall under the category of violent protests. And at least to my understanding, that's not how protests work. There are violent protests, and there are non-violent protests. Violence, per the dictionary, just so that we're super clear on this, is behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. Blocking the flow of traffic might be an inconvenience to a lot of people. It might be unethical. We might disagree with the protesters themselves, but the idea that they are being violent is wrong. Pause for a sec. Quick note, I should have mentioned this during the initial recording, but the word force has a scientific definition governed by the equation F force equals m mass times a acceleration. I know, basic physics. In this case, we have a mass times acceleration 0. The protesters aren't moving. If they're obstructing, they're stationary. There is no acceleration. 0m is 0. There is no force, Matt. And if there's no force, it doesn't constitute violence. Okay, back to the video. There are also legal protests and illegal protests, and this protest happens to break the law. That's fair. But when you are simply obstructing the passage of a channel, that is not a form of violence. And to equate it with being a form of violence, I think, is the same slippery slope of people on the left who claim that language that serves as an inconvenience to their gender identity is a form of violence.
Thousands of people. That is not nonviolent. And you have no idea where those thousands of people are going or where they need to be. They could be going to the hospital with a sick child.
They could be. It's a major inconvenience. And that's why we consider it illegal to obstruct in this way. However, that's not the same thing as saying that it is violent. And I will remind you, Matt, that it is particularly insensitive of you to believe that your right to use language that might offend somebody who wants to receive certain pronouns is in fact completely okay. But Matt, you don't know if those people who request your use of specific pronouns have a certain medical condition, or if you offend them in a certain way, they're going to have a heart attack. Pause. Upon further reflection, I still do stand by my point about these medical conditions and how it could serve as a danger to someone if they're to be offended. Yet, people will probably point out, the condition I have chosen, getting a heart attack, is likely not to occur within the demographic who would simultaneously be requesting certain pronouns. So it is a little bit humorous in that way. Let's continue. You don't know that. You don't know what these people's lives are like. You don't know how your words affect them. Perhaps your words are so offensive that it constitutes violence. Matt, you're playing a dangerous game here, where you're referring to these indirectly obstructionary forms of expression to be forms of violence. And I don't think you or your audience realize just how close you're dancing with authoritarian mindsets.
You don't know. Not to mention, you're trapping all these people in their cars in the heat out in the desert. So yeah, that's a violent act, and it should be treated as such.
It's a violent act, Matt. When you call Dylan Mulvaney all of these names, you don't know how that impacts Dylan Mulvaney. How dare you talk to Dylan Mulvaney in that way? You have no idea how your words are impacting Dylan Mulvaney. It's a violent attack on this person's character.
Notice something else, and really take note of this. Everybody loves the fact that these cops are just shutting these a-holes down. Everyone loves it.
And let's talk about this too, because for the people who do appreciate this kind of force, think about the things you care about and that you believe are taking place in our society that are unethical. Matt, you yourself are against the medical transitions of minors from one gender to another gender. Imagine that you were protesting something like that, and the police deemed you to be so obstructive of the scene that without even asking you to stop your obstruction, they just rammed a vehicle into your physical belongings. Because that's really what all of this is about. Yes, they were obstructing people. Yes, this was a breach of the law. But in a just society, the response from our police force needs to be commensurate with the extent of the infraction itself. And I'm going to say this to other people that I know work with the Daily Wire. I know I'm a small YouTuber here. But if this were to get around, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, I know you guys are all about your freedoms here, and that we should not be endorsing violence against peaceful protesters when it is not warranted. You, Jordan Peterson yourself, went on a whole campaign about how mandating the use of pronouns is an example of ceding the linguistic territory to tyrants. Well, let me ask you, Jordan Peterson, do you believe that Matt's advocacy for the use of force in the case of a peaceful protest is maximizing the liberty in our society? Is that how you want your society to operate?
There's a climate protester group called Climate Defiance, and they posted that video that I just showed you with an outraged caption that says,
I bet.
Words fail. Words utterly fail. Today, a police truck plowed into a peaceful climate blockade. These are the people entrusted to keep us safe. These are the people we've granted a monopoly on the use of force. How is this okay? And the thing is, every single comment responding to that post, every single one was like, it's okay with me.
What do I think the police should have done in this instance? A just use of police force would have only taken place after police had requested that the protesters move over to enable the flow of traffic. If they do not comply, then you have the warranty to physically remove them or physically remove the blockade. There are procedures that must be in place so that we're not just falling victim to authoritarian police state tendencies. Pause again. I, of course, don't have the context for what happened before the truck rammed its way through the barricade, but at the very least, we can recognize that the protesters did not use force. But guess what? The police did. I should point out that beforehand, there was video footage released of a random citizen trying to talk to the protesters and get them to move their protest out of the middle of the road. Obviously, random citizens can't take any kind of forceful action. They're just limited to words, so it's not as if the protesters had not been asked to move out of the way by someone else, they just hadn't been asked by the police. And I think it would have been a responsible thing to do for the police to take that measure. Okay, back to the video.
That's how everyone feels. Okay, if you were to put this video in front of all 330 million people in the country, it's guaranteed that at least 329,999.
And that's not an argument. It doesn't matter how people feel. I thought it was facts don't care about your feelings, Matt. Isn't that the Daily Wire's whole thing? It doesn't matter whether 330 million people feel a certain way about something. If you're merely giving in to people's feelings about what is politically right, then we're just operating by tyranny of the majority. You're against tyranny of the minority. But clearly, in this case, if everybody's in agreement, if everyone's fed up with the actions of eco-friendly protesters because we don't agree with their initiative, then yeah, no, violence against them is perfectly fine. I'm also against tyranny of the minority. There's no reason why language should be policed in a way that is ordained by the state. There's no reason why a majority of people should have to solely cater to the interests of a minority. However, I'm also against tyranny of the majority, Matt.
9,993 of them would love the video.
If every single person in the entire country were for vaccine mandates, except for one, because that's the feeling, right? Vaccine mandates, they have to happen because it's for the sake of public safety. And we're protecting people, Matt. Don't you know vaccine mandates are going to help people stay safe? Don't you know mask mandates are going to help people stay safe? It has nothing to do whether it has public support, Matt. It's about optimizing for freedom.
Very close to 100%. And why is that? Well, because the average person is sick of this. They're just sick of it.
I bet they are.
You know, I think like 10 years ago, maybe, that same exact video might get a slightly, I think still most people would be on the side of the cops, but there might be a few more people who would see that video 10 years ago and say, oh, that was a little excessive. Come on, you don't have to do that.
It is excessive. I think the main issue that we had here in this video was that very early on, in an attempt and a desire to suit his own political agenda, he felt it necessary to obfuscate the definition of violence itself, in the same way that people on the left obfuscate the definition of violence when it suits their political purposes.
But these days, people are sick. They're tired of the lawlessness. They're tired of these kinds of jerks interfering with your day for no reason.
Interfering with your day for no reason. Matt, the nature of protest is disruptive in general. So if you're going to call action that interferes, action that is annoying, and it makes people fed up as warranting a violent response from the state, I think you should really take a look at what you're advocating. Because if the issue is flipped, if you were the one standing for something that you believed in, and this is how the state came down on you, I think you'd be singing a different tune. That's my sense of it. And so, for the conservatives in the audience, I know I've gone very hard against someone that you probably respect. I'm not asking you not to listen to this person on anything. I think he still has valuable things to say on these cultural issues. I think he's made a valuable contribution with What is a Woman. I think it's opened a lot of people's eyes. But I saw a lot of people down in Matt Walsh's comment section that were just, yeah, that were just nodding along. You need to have a little bit more critical thinking than that, in my view. Don't stop listening to him, but distance yourself from that perspective. That's what I would suggest. And when I advocate for something that's as ridiculous as this, I want you to push back against me hard, as people did when I reacted to Oliver Anthony, and I did not articulate myself very well.
They're tired of people who make your life harder and more miserable just because they can. They're tired of the lack of accountability, the fact that people can just do whatever they want and the law is not enforced. They're sick of it. And they're ready for some tough love, some rough and tumble. That's what they're ready for. And I think Republican politicians would do well to take note of that. That is the mood. That's the national mood right now.
And ultimately, that is why Matt Walsh, today, is canceled.